Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you. Welcome to Sacred Ground. This is a collaboration between Creation Care and Faith Formation with connection to Earth Day and inspiration from the theme from Interfaith Power and Light's Faith, Climate, and Action Week. But first, we would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. We welcome and thank Dean Steve Thomason, the Reverend Canon Jennifer King Doherty, and the Reverend Canon Nancy Ross for their support of this event and for their continued conversations about justice in its many forms. And we welcome especially our panelists tonight for sharing their passions and commitment to changing our communities. Those panelists are Steve Dorsch. Steve is the Field Director of Common Acre. Hannah Cavendish Palmer, who is the Executive Director of Oxbow Farm. And Naima Clark, Founder and Director of Nurturing Roots. And Aaron Scott, Chaplain and Organizer of Chaplains on the Harbor, Harbor Roots Farm, and Diocesan Missioner for Anti-Poverty Organizing. So a little bit about what's in store tonight. Our main program will go until 8:30 tonight with discussions with our panelists. We've got some breakout discussion and some Q&A. And at any point, please feel free to put your kind and respectful questions in the chat and along the way. And we're going to ensure that this is a focused experience for everyone by staying muted. And if you're not muted, we'll probably gently remind you of that. At 8:30, the program ends, but I don't know if you're like me. Sometimes these Zoom meetings, like we have this intense connection with each other as little squares, and then we just like push a button, and there's none of that lingering that we often do in our doorways or on our front porches as we say goodbye to each other and catch up on just a little bit of this and that. And so we're going to keep the Zoom room open for another half hour or so. It's not required. You can feel free to leave, but for those of you that are lingerers, it's an opportunity to just not quite exit the Zoom room quite so fast. So let's start with prayer. And Edie, can you lead us in prayer?
Thanks, Lisa. I want to add my welcome to all who are gathered here tonight, and to let you know that for our gathering, we've chosen a prayer that's been offered by Michael Curry, who's the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. And it was created as part of the Good News Gardens, which is an element of the Creation Care ministry of the Episcopal Church. Let us pray. O God, creator of all, help us to bear witness to the way of love, growing in faith and action through our relationship with the land around us. We believe that when we commit to planting more, be it beehives or herb gardens, and praying more with our words and our deeds, and proclaiming more through our stories and our bounty, we can share the loving, liberating, and life-giving good news of God's love with all people and find ourselves, our church, and our world transformed. God, we ask your blessing upon our gathering this night. Amen.
Thank you, Edie. So before we start the conversation with our panelists, I want to share a few thoughts about the connection between creation care and faith formation. So many times scripture reminds us of the important role that food has played in the lives of people. From the earliest days of Genesis, we learn of seed-bearing plants and trees that bear fruit and bring diversity according to their kind. We see how God gives rain to make the earth flourish. We hear about struggle when there's famine or drought, and knowing where the next meal will be. If you think about it, in Jesus's ministry, food is often where the action is and where conversations unfold. We see Jesus bring abundance from little in the feeding of the 5,000 and even creatively using the leftovers after that feast. We read how food refreshes so that we can go on our way and do good work, and we are asked to share it with others. Food is described as the bounty of creation that can strengthen and restore. So, our choices as humans over time have led to changes, fundamental changes in the Earth's natural systems, including changes in ways in which soil is created and conserved, ways in which water is conserved, and the quality of that very water, as well as changes in land and how that has intersected changes in climate and climate warming. So, as when you look at land change in response to climate change, we cannot help but recognize the implications on growing, harvesting, and distributing food. And yet the story is far from over. We can find hope in participating in God's redemptive work when we pay attention to the journey from ground to table and we cultivate relationships and diversity and stewardship. So, in our conversation tonight, we have panelists from our own community who will help us in doing just that, to think more closely about some of these connections and our opportunities that would include things like how do we produce and share nutritious food with others, including those in underserved communities, to reduce food insecurity and to increase food variety? How do we reclaim and restore land that might have been wasted or less beneficially used? How do we create long-term impact on both land and local climate developments? And fundamentally, how do we build relationships and strengthen our community in part through food? So, enough of me talking. Let's get started by getting your input. And so, in the chat, and by now in the pandemic, hopefully you all know how to use that chat. Um, when you think about food and faith, what's on your mind? And this is one of those, any answer is okay. We're just trying to get a sense of where we are as a community. So please start sharing what's on your mind with respect to food. And I'm going to give particular kudos to the first brave person that starts to do it. Marjorie, thank you.
Lisa?
This, feel free to keep some of these ideas coming, but what already, there's some really interesting thoughts coming forward, which really are about this paradox we have of abundance, yet equity and justice issues intersecting. And with the help of others on my planning team, we kind of anticipated that. And so I've got just two slides here, but one talks about food insecurity and the fact that it's real. In King County alone, what is this? Almost 120,000 households receive basic food assistance. And of course, the pandemic has affected this, a 17% increase from January of last year. And what that rolls up into is that 1 in 6 Washingtonians are hungry and unsure of where their next meal will come from. And this is not uniformly distributed. We know that each year in King County, Black and African American families and Hispanic and Latino families experience food insecurity at substantially higher rates than the county average. So, what's ironic about all of this, and if I could have the next slide, is that at the very same time, we have this amazing amount of food waste, 370,000 tons. Remember, tons are 2,000 pounds? 370,000 tons of edible food is thrown away each year in Washington state. And if we think about the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere that we could avoid if we reduce food waste just by half in the next 30 years, it's 10 gigatons. That's a lot. It's equivalent to taking 2,570 coal-fired power plants offline. So wasted food rots, it produces methane gas, which is a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So we've got these ironies, and that's part of the overall setting that we're having our conversation in today. So let's actually start that conversation. And I'm very excited to introduce the 4 panelists. I'm going to tell you just a snapshot about each of them, starting with Stephen. Stephen. I love this quote from Stephen. Stephen tells us, I believe that we have a sacred bond with the earth and feel called to this work as a life of service to our communities and to nature. The most enjoyable part of my career is getting to work directly with our communities and our amazing team. I also love that I get to work outside, but it's the people that make it special. So he's the field director of Common Acre, and it's a nonprofit in Seattle which works to restore relationships between people and the land. Okay, next one is Hannah, the interim executive director of Oxbow Farm. And what Hannah says is, I'm fascinated by food production because it is an integral part of the human existence, and it requires us to make challenging trade-offs. I am passionate about using our privileged position as North American farmers to find ways of farming with as little impact on the planet as possible. And Oxbow is on the cutting edge of this exploration. And she's been doing this for a while. She spent the last 15 years working in farming and food systems throughout this region. We're really delighted to have Hannah here. And the next one is Naima, the founder and the director of Nurturing Roots. And Naimi has shared with us that I do this work because it's underserved and undervalued, because too many of us don't have an outlet to heal freely. Too many of us are detached from our humanity. I love sharing about the connections we share with the environment. It's our job to make things better for our seeds and future generations. Naima is a Seattle native. Nurturing Roots Farm is up on Beacon Hill, and it addresses food justice issues in the community. She's also an organizing key holder of the Black Power Epicenter Collective. So can I get all, oh, Erin, okay, Erin, I almost went too fast. Erin is the co-founder of Chaplains on the Harbor. And Erin writes, through Harbor Roots, we are reclaiming our right to fresh food, to sustainable use of the land, and to an economy that benefits all of us, not just a few at the top. Erin joined the staff of Chaplains on the Harbor in January of 2015. He currently serves as Chaplain on the Harbor's development director, supporting leadership development as well as spearheading fundraising. Chaplains on the Farmer then launched Harbor Roots Farm, hiring young people in recovery out of jail and off the street to supply fresh fruit produced by local food banks. So with that, can we get all 4 panelists the wonders of Zoom? Okay, here we are. It's so good to have you here. Um, so what I'd like to do is to start out by asking each of you, and this is a question that you could probably speak at length about, but in a minute or so, give us a brief introduction about who you are, the organization you represent, and why you do what you do. And can I just do this in the order that we did the introduction? So, Stephen, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, thank you to everyone, to my panelists and organizers and everyone that put this together. It's an honor to be here with you all, and thanks everyone for joining. My name is Stephen Dorsch. I'm the field director with the Common Acre, and our organization is a nonprofit organization in Seattle that restores relationships between people and the land through agriculture, ecology, and art. And we do this through a variety of different programs, and we can talk more about that later on, maybe in some breakout sessions. But I'm delighted to join you all tonight for this topic. It's an enriching one and something I love discussing, the many connections between ourselves, humans, and nature. I think are kind of one and the same. And so yeah, there's a lot of great stuff to get into. And so I also want to say that Braiding Sweetgrass, where I noticed some of the questions were sort of inspired from, is a book that I just care deeply about. And so that was a great choice for the topic. And so I look forward to talking with you all this evening. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Stephen. Hannah, why do you do what you do?
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Lisa, and all the panelists. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, so I am with Oxbow Farm, and we are really a conservation center. So we do a lot of different things. There's a conservation and restoration component of our work that's really important to us and sort of our North Star. And then we're also farming. We grow vegetables. And then we also have a native plant nursery. That's another really important component of our work, and a rocking education program. So a lot of the work we do is on our site. We're between Carnation and Duval in the Snoqualmie Valley, but then we do a lot of outreach activities as well. And we're about 200 acres, more than 200 acres. So we take our land management responsibility really seriously. But the reason why I'm so excited to be here tonight, I think that anytime we can have a conversation about food and how we eat, it's funny. It's such a personal topic, but it's also a political topic, and something that I hope we all get more and more comfortable talking about. I'm always excited. I love to eat. I'm always excited to talk about food. I'm always excited to meet people who want to know about the farming part of the food system. I feel like we never get to talk about that enough. So I'm really happy that so many people have joined us tonight. It's really exciting.
Thank you, Hannah. And Naima, I have to say, I saw you smile when Hannah said, I love to eat. And my sense is there might have been a little resonance there, but Naima, tell us about the good work you're doing and why you do it.
Definitely love to nourish my body with the food. But yeah, definitely a pleasure to be alongside so many folks tonight. Thanks so much for inviting me. It was exciting to get to know Emily through phone and now through the internet, but hopefully soon in person. But yes, so my name's Naima. I'm born and raised here in Seattle, Washington, South Seattle to be exact. I am ED, but I like to just call myself a farm queen at Nurturing Roots. I like what Stephen was saying about, the connection. Like a lot of it is more than just the plants, more than just, pulling something out of the ground and eating it. Although that is an amazing result of the passion and the time and patience that goes into food, that goes into just, I guess, caring for the soil, really. But a lot of what we do at Nurturing Roots is just reconnecting to that fact, re-inspiring, I guess, the imagination when it comes to people of color and how we engage in agricultural spaces. A lot of spaces haven't necessarily looked like Black woman farmer. So, you know, I've been that person for my community to kind of stand in that place, especially being in an urban environment. We're not in a rural county with 200 acres. We have a 1/4 acre on Beacon and Graham, but the biodiversity that we have is inspired by, you know, nature. There's a way that, you know, our community directly reflects our patch. And for me, it's inspiring being able to have so many folks from different walks of life come out supporting the farm with whatever technique they have passed down from whoever in their community or through their family, but being able to see the blood and the sweat from so many, I guess, historical figures in the community, just kind of poured into one space is phenomenal. Unlike my farm colleagues at Nurturing Roots, we don't necessarily sell any food. So a lot of what we do is just invested in the healing aspect of agriculture and farming and the technique of nourishing soil, caring for a plant all the way through, being able to value not only the broccoli flower, but the broccoli that turns into a seed and sprouts into this blossom. But honoring every part of the vegetable, honoring every part of the life cycle, and kind of trying to reflect that in our own humanity, but just reconnecting. Thanks.
Naima, thank you so much. And Erin, tell us a little bit about, yeah.
Oh, sure. I'm Erin Scott. I'm a co-founder at Chaplains on the Harbor, and we're a congregation of around 600 poor, homeless, and incarcerated people in rural Grays Harbor County. So if you drive out to Aberdeen, that's the largest city in Grays Harbor County, and our programs are scattered countywide. We started 8 years ago with $500 in a backpack full of sandwiches and a pack of cigarettes. And today we run 6 feeding programs across the county, cold weather shelter, street and jail outreach, a newsletter that circulates through every prison in Washington state, community center, Narcan distribution. But the biggest piece, I think, especially for this conversation, is Harbor Roots Farm. A lot of our younger people who were about to get out of jail, when our clergy would visit them, would say, we really don't want to end up back here, but nobody, like, there's no jobs, especially for people with criminal records in this county. And some of us have been trained in prison to do culinary work. So think about food, think about jobs with food. You know, the guy who actually first suggested that, Zach, he died at 24 of medical neglect. So he was not able to see Harbor Roots Farm launch, but we continue to do it in his memory and so many other people's memory. And we specifically create living wage jobs for millennials who are getting off the street, getting out of jail. And food is central to every single thing we do, every meeting, every program, every crisis call we respond to. All of our legal advocacy, we've sued the city of Aberdeen twice. We just wouldn't be able to do any of that if we were not constantly feeding people, because nobody's going to come to a meeting if there's not food. Yeah.
So what I find is an interesting theme that threads through all of your comments. I'm going to ask you to go a little bit deeper on this, which is you get up in the morning every day or almost every day and do this work. And, you know, we see, you know, kind of the web page or the nice brochure or whatever, but can you tell us more about what doing the real work feels like? Because what I'm hearing for all of you is something about land and food and people and communities that don't necessarily, you know, they didn't know necessarily they wanted to be connected in this way, or they might have longed for it but didn't have a route in. So tell me a little bit about what it's like to do the deeper work you do. beyond sort of, I'm seeing all of you like getting your hands dirty physically, but then there's the nitty gritty of nurturing all those humans. In any order, jump in. You're all smiling, like,
I'll jump in because I think there's a story I want to share that I think you know well, I guess to directly answer your question, what gets me out of bed every morning is usually one of my young children. They're 4.5 and 6, so that's what usually gets me started anyway. But once I'm out the door, the people are, like I said, in the introduction, it's like the people really are what make it so special. And when I first started doing this, I was really just like trying to have a good excuse to be outside a lot. And then the more I did it, and the more I realized that I was having all these just really, nurturing and fulfilling interactions with people and getting to know people. And then as the years went on, I got to know people pretty well, and people kind of become part, like literally like part of your family. And then there's just various levels of that. But there was one, it was about this time of year last year, when we were still like figuring out what this COVID thing was. And there was some pretty raw moments. We're very much on the front lines of our communities, and so that gets pretty messy, sometimes. And so it's not always very glamorous, I can tell you that, but it is always very fulfilling, and it's just getting to know people. And what happened last year, is no one knew what was going to happen. And and a lot of us were in our homes, and like we were still as our organization kind of getting out there, and we had to get things planted, we had to get out there and get them watered, we had to do the work, there was clearly going to be this increased need for food, and we had to put ourselves out there. And then what happened was like, no one was seeing anybody else, right? And so like someone would come out to walk their dog, and you'd be down there, doing whatever you were doing in the garden, and then it was just like, and we were just interacting, in this crazy unknown time. And like, it was so impactful for me realizing that like, well, these people are getting something out of this, and so am I, because like I'd go home and like I'd be so happy to get back to my family and my wife, but like, they weren't, no one's leaving their house, right? And so like it was interesting to find this, like, these relationships that we had been building year after year after year with our communities, like all of a sudden had like a weightier, feeling like almost like bigger importance to it. And anyway, that just was just something I really wanted to share, because it was just sort of like, it was such a raw, like crazy time, right? But it was going out into the communities and like interacting with people where it was really hitting me every day. I get home and be like, whoa, like that was crazy. And then it's just like, wake up and get out there and do it again, and then as we started to understand a little bit better about how it was spread, and then people were really like seeking out those moments, I think, even more. They're like, oh, they know they're out in the garden at 4, I'm gonna go talk to those guys for a little bit, and so I don't know. I think there was something between like maybe people slowing down a little bit in their lives. Maybe there was something about seeing some of those bare shelves at the grocery stores, but like people took a lot more notice last year and this year than like I had ever experienced before. And so it was like, I guess I was feeling a lot of the love that I had been sort of like putting in year after year, kind of starting to get reflected back. And that was just, I was just so thankful that I had the work, that I had, the communities, and that we had put in that time. So when we were in this time of crisis, we were right there, and but that it was this like mutually enriching experience, between our community and people, and what I was getting from everyone. And so anyway, I'm gonna make room for the next person to jump in there. So thank you.
thank you, Stephen. So much more about sustaining besides just calories and vitamins. Others?
I might jump in and just say that for me and sort of my community of farmers that I'm in, the moment that farming was declared essential in, by Governor Inslee and during the pandemic, that was a really important moment for all of us. Like, I wasn't sure what was going to happen there. Like, I had sort of heard about the concept of essential workers, but I didn't know what was going to be on that list. And for us, that was a really pivotal moment. And it means a lot. Like, this is not optional work that happens. It's a really critical part of human existence, as I said in my quote. And I think that farming is a hustle, and Stephen alluded to this, like you do it all day and then you do it again the next day. And it's serious physical work. It feels really tiring. One of my closest farmer friends has said that, she knows she's doing a great job if she wants to quit at least a few times a season. Like, that's how it feels. It feels really hard. And there's also this need to be sort of a jack of all trades. We're really lucky at Oxbow that we have a big enough staff that people can divide and conquer, and we can all divide up tasks. But on a lot of farms, that's not true. A lot of small farms, that farmer's doing all the things. They're doing all the marketing, they're doing all the outreach, they're doing all the sales, they're driving the van for distribution, and they're doing seed ordering, and they're putting the crops in the ground. I mean, the number of tasks is sort of mind-boggling. And so I think it's really important to talk about farming is really hard work. And having it declared essential was pretty awesome. One of the things that's been really gratifying has been seeing the sort of increase in CSA, so the community supported agriculture programs, the sort of subscription style produce delivery. I love that because it's a direct connection to farmers, between farmers and people who eat. And I think they're really meaningful programs. And one of the reasons why they're so meaningful, the concept is that the person eating is assuming some of the risk that farmer bears. And so that had sort of extra significance during this COVID time. Like, this is a really risky business. And, same failure rate as a restaurant, maybe higher. But we also have this farm succession problem and the age of, people like to talk about the age of farming and the crisis around that nationwide. So farming's really hard, like I said before, and the CSA model sort of helps alleviate that burden to some extent. So anyway, I love that we seem to be in a moment where people are thinking about this more and connecting around it. And there's nothing like that direct connection to the person who's out there in the dirt, like really doing it. It's really cool. Anything we can do to increase connectivity, I think is really important. Keeping it real.
Erin, I don't know if you can see Naima is pointing at you. Is that what you're doing, Naima?
Yes. Did you want to go?
Sure. So yeah, I guess the day-to-day of our work, it honestly did not change hugely after COVID because people still didn't have housing, right? Like, people still didn't have access to the medical care they needed. And that was true. That was all true before the pandemic. It was certainly exacerbated by the pandemic, but there's a human being can only prioritize so many life-threatening crises in their life in a single day. So we shifted our day-to-day operations only a little bit. Instead of gathering people inside, which was actually really important to us because people were able to get out of the rain for a little while and use a bathroom and connect to the internet. We had to shift. We still had bathroom access available, but we had to shift all our programming to go, all our meals to go, and it was harder for our clergy to be able to do they stopped in-person visitations at the Grace Harbor County Jail, which was really scary for our incarcerated parishioners, because trapping people in cages during a pandemic is very, very, very dangerous. And then, like everybody has already said, farming is not work you can do on Zoom. Feeding people is not work you can do on Zoom. So our operation stayed moving and growing because more people are hungry. More people kept coming to our programs, and then our work. I mean, we keep doing the thing where we just meet people where they're at. Whether it's at their camps, even though we couldn't visit people in jail, we were on the phone and JPay and writing letters a lot more often. We had a lot more funerals this year, which sucks. But we, especially for our farm team, our staff there's 14 of us right now, and 11 of us are formerly homeless. A lot of folks are in recovery from addiction. So for recovery, isolation is just a killer. So being able to bring people together safely, or at least navigating, safety outside, continuing to do this work was a huge lifeline for people being able to stay active in their recovery. And yeah, I think part of all that for us is we look at the present moment, we try to think about what's to come in the future, but knowing our history is really important. Even in the day-to-day stuff, we're always sharing stories, big picture and small picture, like people's individual stories of like, oh, I used to, or my parents used to have jobs in the logging industry. Somebody broke their back, got hooked on pills, etc. And how that connects to the bigger story of 100 years ago, Grace Harbor County was the timber export capital of the world, and more raw timber flowed through the port of Aberdeen than anywhere else on earth. And all that was taken. And after the trees were taken, the people were abandoned. So we're really focused on knowing that history as an effective means for restoring land and people together. We do a lot of education, a lot of popular education, a lot of organizing around those themes too.
Thank you, Erin. Naima, do you have some words?
Yes. I guess I would like to share that the Nurturing Roots motto is really healing the spirit from, the root all the way up. So it's like when you come to Nurturing Roots, this work is like finding family that you didn't know you were connected to. There's so many volunteers that have been connected to one another through just coming in, each Sunday and just sharing in that spirit of cultivation or creativity. We've terraced things together. It's attempted to build ponds. It's still in construction, but we've done so many things together, and you wouldn't even know. You're working alongside lawyers, or you're working alongside, educators, whoever you are in your daily life. When you come there, you're just you, and there's not many opportunities that you have to just shed off this shell. And I think all our lives we develop this shell, and in childhood we have that spark of imagination, and we have that spark of not even caring where someone came from or how much money's in their pocket. But a lot of my work is that. So I definitely have been inspired so much to just call this my day job. It's like, this is actually my passion on paper, I guess. But to me, it's just so fun to be able to share in, like I said, that experience in, a young person pulling a carrot out of the ground and realizing, a carrot is dirty at first. It's not just clean and pristine and found in a supermarket. A chicken's egg is warm at first. So I went and found an egg and it's warm, Mom. And that like astonishment. And then seeing the same thing happen with someone who's in their 50s or 60s, because they never had that opportunity to find a warm egg. And it isn't fair. So a lot of the work is that beautiful moment of like awe. And then a lot of the moment is then shadowed with a lot of, how come I didn't know this? How come there wasn't this benefit to me? And, some people have that legacy of, I grew up with 100 acres. I grew up with a house. Fortunately, I had a yard, but friends of mine had apartments. A few friends of mine never knew anything about growing anything. It was microwave this and that. There wasn't home cooked dinners, family nights. There was a lot of different spectrum that we have to encounter in doing this work. I also encounter moments like this, where there's 2 pieces of chocolate in a room, but I have to find comfort and I have to find, my footing. But I'm also sometimes, for example, I was at a TILF conference, Seattle TILF, one of the biggest farm conglomerates in Seattle, state of Washington almost. I'm going to a conference to be a keynote. And I'm walking in the hospitality room and looking at all the different seeds and John Deere that and this and that. And no one wants to talk to me. No one wants to share a brochure or, see what type of farming I'm doing so that they could sell me on the next that. Until one person said, hey, is your name Naima? Are you nurturing roots? And then someone turned, oh, you're speaking upstairs. What time is your, after that, there was this glitter on top of me or something. And so there's that moment of awe. But then there's that moment of, why is it like this? Why am I the only person able to speak this or have this, testimony that I can share? And why aren't there more people that know? Why aren't there more people to speak alongside me? So a lot of my work is that trauma. A lot of the work is realizing the first time I was introduced to this land of ours and this amazing art of cultivation was through slavery in my 9th grade class, watching Roots. To me, that doesn't make much sense when it comes to, this is a valuable asset. This is something people make billions of dollars off of. They sway governments from. So a lot of my work is unwrapping that gift, taking a look at what's inside, trying to articulate it to communities of color who have been impacted by this and who have to, have to find a courage to kind of stand in it and then heal from it. I've healed from being able to see worms wiggle. They're not ill to me. Now I understand why spiders are running around, and it was because I had to get my feet dirty. I had to get in there, face some kind of fear. So a lot of our work is trauma, but a lot of it is so inspiring. A lot of it is everything I can fortunately say I value my life doing. I value committing my life to doing this work. It's not a career. It's a soul fulfillment that now I can move on and be okay with. It's really hard to find inspiring, life-giving work here. And so being able to do this, it's everything to me, but it's definitely something that inspires.
Mm-hmm. You're all such wonderful storytellers. And Naima, I'm going to go to bed tonight thinking about that feeling of holding a warm egg, because that is, it's so darn alive. It's just, it's wonderful. So, this is a church-sponsored event that has the word faith formation around it, and you're all speaking about this tremendous work you do that is, to be successful, you feel like a couple of times a year you just want to quit because it's so dang hard, and that it's, and yet, there's this drive that you have and this way you keep doing it. And, I know it's hard because you don't really know any of us, but are you willing to share a little bit more about what are the beliefs or the faith practice, or what keeps you going? Like what, when you want to quit, what makes you come back? And I feel a little like I'm prying a bit, but I am. And anybody who's willing to share, I would love to hear more about it. What sustains you?
Even stuck going first every time now. I'll give it a go. So I think for me, somebody like motivated by thinking about tricky problems. And I am Jewish. And there is a thing in Judaism about asking a lot of questions and sort of not being afraid to ask the hard questions, not shying away from asking tough questions. And I think for me in food and farming, a lot of that is about the environment and the environmental impact of farming. Farming is extractive. I mean, you're taking a landscape that was not for humans, hypothetically, and turning it into something that gets something for humans, creates something for humans. And so figuring out how to do that in ways that are compatible with environmental protection, I think is really interesting and deserves a lot of deep thinking. The movie Kiss the Ground is one that was recommended as sort of part of the process of thinking about this panel. And I was really intrigued by some of the messages in that film around sort of the actions that we can take as individuals to be a part of environmental restoration through farming. So for me, I guess on the motivation and faith side, it's the puzzle part of my mind. It's the wanting to solve those things that I find really motivating. We're challenged. There's plenty of environmental problems to tackle. And I'll just mention that in the Snoqualmie Valley, unless you count Vashon, this is the closest farming area to the Seattle Urban Center. And contiguous farmland. This is not to downgrade any of the really important urban farming work that's happening. I think all of the urban farming work is extremely important, but we also need rural lands for farming. And Snoqualmie Valley is one of those really important rural places in King County. And one of the reasons that it is farmable is that it is a floodway. And because we have flooding every year, that is the reason that it hasn't been developed into industrial parks like the Green River Valley, for instance, in Kent, Auburn. It's a great example of what happens when you don't have when you dam the river, you end up with an industrial park. So anyway, we're really blessed by flooding in that it's the reason why we have farmland that's still farmable in the Snoqualmie Valley. It also brings us alluvial soils that are great for farming. It also puts us, it sort of hits you in the face, every year that Mother Nature matters and is calling the shots. So anyway, it's one of the things in our farming lives here in the Valley that sort of helps us stay in tune with how important it is to solve that puzzle around environmental protection and farming. One of the things about flooding is that anything we put on our fields, that is going to end up in floodwaters, that is going to end up on all the other farms in our valley, and that's going to end up in the estuary at Everett. And it's a really tangible, you can look at that floodwater and know how it doesn't take, a lot of deep thinking to figure out how important that is, how important those environmental decisions are. Anyway, so I'm motivated by the tricky problem solving.
I love that, Hannah. And I love how you connected it with the faith tradition of your upbringing as well. Others?
Go ahead, Erin.
Sure. I guess, we're part of creation, right? And not in an abstract way, not just like a sort of squishy metaphysical way. We all know that, but I think poor communities know that much more intimately than affluent communities. So you think of like sort of the history of what we now call environmentalism. You have some of these trends where like environmental environmentalism from the top often comes from this desire to protect beautiful spaces that you can enjoy. And environmentalism from the bottom, you know, from poor people, from historically exploited and oppressed communities, has always been motivated by a desire to like not be poisoned by your own drinking water. So for me, the gospel is important, and the gospel is good news for the poor specifically, not the rich, not the powerful. It's good news in this lifetime and on the surface of this planet for people who have not had good news. I think the Bible is full of stories that illustrate how much God wants our mutual thriving, along with the thriving of the earth. Manna from heaven, right, is like a really, my favorite Bible story is manna from heaven. But to get to a manna place, that requires leaving Egypt behind. And so the thriving of Pharaoh is not in the best interests of the Israelites or God. So we have this white supremacist capitalist society, a very, still Christian hegemonic one. And so we get fed this idea that like, maybe it's enough to just be like more benevolent or nicer to poor and exploited and oppressed communities, like give people a little bit more food, a little bit better food, but not the means or the land or the time to produce our own. And that is not what I read in the scriptures, right? Like, Pharaoh was able to rule harshly over the Israelites in the first place because he snatched up their land and their livestock and then their bodies and their labor in exchange for food during the famine. So good news for the poor to me, and the reason I do this work, it means radically changing the balance of power so that Pharaoh is no longer in control. And I think good news for the poor and the earth. I think those are two inseparable things. It means upending empire and imperialism.
Aaron, thank you. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think what keeps me going. There's a lot of different things, but I think there's always more to learn in a garden, and the way it brings people together. And some of my earliest childhood memories are in my grandmother's garden in the south side of Chicago, and she's a deeply spiritual woman. And would be at this church, which was like literally across the street, this Roman Catholic church. And anyway, I just, she'd get back, and just so many of my early childhood memories are of her in her garden. And I think that I carry that with me. The number of people that this tiny Italian woman would feed with the bounty that came from her garden is, I guess, something I've been trying to like emulate, my whole life. And so it's like, I don't know, I just think that there's always more connection to be done. There's always more to learn from one another. And, the garden is it's a very good place for that. And that, that's kind of a continuation of the theme I was talking about before, but like, there's something that happens when we're kind of bent over a garden bed together. You get into some conversations with people that moments ago were total strangers that really keep me going, and then the people remember that, and then you build this relationship together, and it would have not happened had there not been this opportunity to connect with one another, just like we do over a meal of food. You just get into things that that doesn't happen in other places and with other people, and growing the food, sharing it with people, sharing that experience, that keeps me going. And there's always more to learn, I think, is what the beauty of it. Every season is different. There's new challenges. We've learned that this past year and a half. And there's just always more work to do. And then your relationship with the people that come back deepens, and that fills your cup in this, this even more special way. And so, that's what keeps me showing up every day is just continuing to be enriched by the people that interact with our gardens. And sometimes you don't always, that doesn't always happen in person, and there's kind of the intangibles, the hard to quantify things, the people that maybe are inspired by the garden when they walked by, and then they go home and are inspired to do the same, and you never even interacted with them, but the garden did, and then like that legacy of place, and how we're beautifying, these places via gardens is deeply fulfilling for me. And I get to go enjoy them, day after day, and you get to see how that work you put in, you just slowly is turning these what we call underutilized urban spaces into places of bounty and beauty, and places where we can connect with one another.
Thanks, Stephen. Naima, you have anything to share here?
Yes, I think what I'd add is that we geographically are on a campus. We share with Bethany Church on Beacon and Graham. So I think, a radical spirituality is what I want to kind of lean on. The idea that a church was going to welcome a BIPOC, queer-led space to kind of facilitate its own liberation. We share a campus with REWA, which is a community-based daycare center, along with another co-op center. And then we have Got Green that does a lot of climate justice. So just the gumbo pot of organizing that's happening on site is phenomenal. And the idea that, it's all out of this idea that we want to have a deeper understanding for what it means to really have community. We want to have a deeper understanding for what it really means to come together and have similar goals. But I think a lot of that I've kind of reflected in my own life. I like to manifest. To me, there is something about, when your mom told you, you keep on doing that, your face is going to stick that way, or you keep on thinking bad thoughts, something bad might happen. There's something about that. Besides the placebo effect, there is something about, you having that deeper connection with your being or what's going on around you. So a lot of that, I think Lion King, I think about the circle of life, being a paramount, staple for me. There was a scar, but also there is something that is an adverse effect to this harmony going on, right? So you can call it what you want, but you have to identify these different things. And there's things along the way, Timon and Pumbaa's, that will help you, and that will teach you Hakuna Matata, I don't know. There's simple kind of ways that I like to lean on. A lot of my childhood is where I found understanding. So for me, it's really going back to that girl and saying, okay, how did you want to be treated in this circumstance? What was going to make you feel like, you were welcomed, or how are you going to just forget about what those people said about you? So to me, a lot of, my spiritual sense is really invested in, how does it feel? Looking at plants, would it make sense if everything was the same, or everything was taken away, or, it didn't get an opportunity to strive? Like, I think about how plants turn towards light. It's insane how you can notice a plant will want the sun, it'll turn to it. And then you think about human beings. So I think about, how do I get to strive? Isn't it necessary for me too to receive some sunlight in order for me to produce amazing fruit, or to produce an amazing, chlorophylled body that, can be the best I can be? Like, to me, there's a lot of my life that I feel like I've developed. I was definitely raised in the church. I've looked at different practices all over the world, Ifa, Buddhism, and it's like, there's a lot of things that are all about you being a good person and just giving back to the simplest thing. Whatever you can give. You don't have to be like Aaron was saying, Pharaoh I think Aaron was talking about Pharaoh. But like you said, you don't have to be this Pharaoh to receive this accolade. The smallest grain of sand is important. So a lot of my faith, I think I couldn't pinpoint it on any necessarily belief. I definitely remember all the traits that my grandma showed me, and raising my finger to walk out of the pews, But it's been a while since I felt at home when it comes to, I guess, a spiritual home. And I've kind of I found my sanctuary in nature and on the farm. It's a place that, I can speak to Creator, I can speak to my Mother Earth, I can speak and it listens, I can give it my all and it gives back. So I think it's something that I can tangibly believe in, and that's what I needed a lot of.
Oh, this panel is like the best. So we're going to pause. We're going to do some breakout groups. You guys aren't going to go away. But in pausing, I do want to say, you guys have all shared a lot, and it's really set a tone, I hope, for the kind of sharing we're going to do in breakout groups. We're going to spend about 10 minutes together. The people that have the technology under control are going to help me with that, but don't quite go yet. Certainly you panelists don't go, because we're going to bring you all back together. But you're going to be in randomly assigned breakout groups with your friends and soon to be friends. And we'd like you to share about, like the panelists, how does food connect you to your deepest values and beliefs? And what are some steps that you might take, or you want to learn more about? What's being stimulated by these conversations? So, wizards of Zoom, move us to our breakout groups.
Yes, Emily, I understand the groups will be together for 10 minutes. And I'll give you a couple of time checks so that you can make sure everybody has a chance to share. So I'm going to invite you to your groups now.
Okay, you guys are really good at chat. Instead of raising our hands to talk about what went on our breakout groups, we're going to do like super fast. Well, maybe, and I'm putting pressure on you. Maybe not super fast, but can everybody write down a sentence or two about their favorite part of their breakout group? As you're wrapping up, I love one of the things that's emerging is meeting new people. And I've been shocked in this Zoom world how we've had a chance to make connections we didn't make before. So we are going to save this chat and be able to reflect about this. Yes, okay, people are reconnecting, making new friends, engaging with the earth and with each other, cross generations. Okay, thank you for doing that. So this last piece that I want to do is to ask if you have any questions that you want to have for the panelists, and let's put them in the chat. And if it's a particular panelist, call them by their name, or just more general reflections. And I think we'll have time. I'm watching the time. I think we'll have time for maybe one or two So don't be shy. People want to know, can you visit Oxbow Farm? All of the farms. Field trips. Okay, panelists.
Totally. Yes. Love field trips. It's a big part of what we do. Yeah, Oxbow is open our farm stand is open every weekend. You can come out to Oxbow anytime.
And Emily's reminding me that we've got more information, and there's a next part that's going to be sharing information. Okay. Okay. Kaya, this is such a good question. For each organization, and this will be a quick round robin, what do you need the most? Like, what's the thing you need? Okay, I know you're no longer lined up in front of me. Where are you, panel?
I'm shameless.
Naima, somehow you always end up going last. Naima, what do you need? You're muted, dear.
Right on. Thanks, Lisa. A lot of what we're oh, no. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to stay camped down in case my bandwidth isn't good. But what we need right now is we've been campaigning to receive 38 acres in Auburn. So we need a lot of political advocacy and support. So definitely I will share my info with Emily so she can share everything with folks, but definitely land acquisition and support when it comes to development.
Yeah. Okay. Aaron, what do you need?
We need to sell more CSA shares. So if you're looking for a CSA share, you can go to harborroots.com and sign up there. If you're in the Seattle area within 10 miles of I-5, I will personally deliver it to your door. Or if you want to come pick it up at Harbor Roots Farm and drive all the way to Grays Harbor County, you can come and see the farm and pick it up there.
Aaron, that's really generous of you to offer that delivery. Stephen, what do you need?
We are at a really wonderful sort of period of our organization where we're really trying to recenter ourselves around the needs of our team members, many of whom, having a good paying job that's helping them, keep their life in Seattle and is one of our big goals, and that means kind of giving people, better jobs that they can live off of, and that takes money, and a lot of grants money can't always be easily applied to paying staff. So we're really looking to build increase our donor network and get more people involved in any way that they can to support the work. And that does not have to be a financial contribution. It can mean just showing up and getting involved in what we're up to and spreading the word of the work. And so, yeah, just engagement, deep engagement with your own communities, and that means supporting organizations like ours and like everyone, all the panelists here. And there's lots of great ways to get involved, and I'll happily talk to anyone at length about that afterwards or by sharing our resources or information.
Thank you, Stephen. Hannah,
what's your greatest need? We want everyone to become a member. So you can become a member of Oxbow and get our newsletters and our communication regularly. And then you get to know about all the events and opportunities to visit and come hang out with us. So that's my one request. And volunteer opportunities. It's another great way to learn about all of our volunteer opportunities. So it's really easy.
What I love from the chat and from actually that really great question that came up from our participants is, what can we do? Like, where can we go next? And what I love is we're going so much more beyond the, oh my God, do I buy organic strawberries or do I not buy? Like all of this sort of individually based behavior in the grocery store. to how it is that we are a community that exists on land, in cities, outside of our cities, and that we feed ourselves as a community. So what we can do next, and the people that are managing the slides, help me. Yes, isn't this amazing? I wish the rest of my life was smooth. Dig in, how to get involved. Okay, so we are going to send you a resource list that will include, it's already quite complete, and anything that came, was bubbling up in terms of contact information, et cetera, that we talked about here. And there's going to be in that resource list, there's volunteer opportunities, and you get a farm fresh recipe from one of our panels. So here, in terms of, I'm not going to, you guys can read, and this will come in your packet, so you don't have to like madly, scratch this down or screenshot it or whatever. That there are things that you can do for all 4 organizations, and how you do it, and the website. So that's going to be coming soon in your email. And events and opportunities, including the National Climate Day prayer, that's tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to this one service for Turtle Island across the entire diocese, interdenominational as well, I believe. I can't see Steve. I hope I haven't messed that up. And the Good News Garden live stream event on Pentecost, more to come on that. And here is the kale salad recipe from Oxbow Farm. You'll get that free. Do I sound like I'm promoting? And then you'll get free steak knives. Carrots glazed with sriracha and honey. Shaved summer squash from Carmen. This is making me hungry. I think we've got one more. It's another recipe. No, there isn't. There's just your beautiful faces. Okay, so with that, I get to once again thank the panel for all you do, for the inspiration that brought you to this work, and the way you've inspired all of us. And for all of you, this is a beautiful spring evening, and here you are with us in Zoom. Many of you have probably been Zooming all day, and here you are doing it in the evening as well. So thank you for spending time with us. And with that, I'm going to ask Edie to give us a closing prayer. But remember, there's the after party. You guys remember that? Okay, so you don't feel like you have, don't you feel like you have to stay? But if you want to linger, and our panelists have agreed to linger, you can. So Edie, do you want to close us out with a prayer?
We will not be handing out steak knives because we don't need them. But thanks. Thank you. Let us pray. Holy and gracious God, you have blessed us with the gifts of sun and soil and seed and water for the nourishment of all living creatures. And you've called us to be stewards of your creation and neighbors in compassionate community with one another. We thank you for the generous wisdom and examples offered by our guests tonight, and for the essential questions and commitments expressed by all. We thank you for opening our ears and our hearts to hear your invitation through one another, and to dare to say yes to that call. May we continue the work you have begun in us for the care and nurture of our communities, and for the healing and regeneration of our beautiful planet Earth. Enlighten, inspire, and guide us to be partners with all of creation. Author of all life, now bless the ending of our day with peace and prepare us for the new day ahead. Amen.
Amen.